maybe this could be an interactive conversation. It's just a little bit of a sharing that we kind of put together. And I'm grateful for this opportunity, also because it's helped me to reflect, on where I'm at. Because as a startup, we constantly change and innovate, and we move so quickly sometimes that I need to kind of like pause and do some stock taking. So I'm always very grateful for opportunities like this because it helps me to reflect, and to just see where we're at. So it's really just a sharing very much today about, my journey. So this is me when I was 5. As a little child,
can I share?
Yeah, it was a party hat.
Was it a birthday party?
Yeah, I believe so. You
don't remember?
I think it was a birthday party. It was a birthday taken at McDonald's or something. Like children have birthday parties at McDonald's. A story that I always share is I always look back at me when I was a little bit younger and found what I was doing as a child pretty fascinating. Kind of thinking back in hindsight. So as a little girl, I used to have my own kind of ecosystem with my brothers at home. So we would actually have our own currencies, and we would make it to be like $10, $5, and sometimes the zeros would accelerate to many, many zeros. And we would use that as a currency, in our own homes to trade, to barter trade for clothes. We would be playing pretend essentially. And when I look back on hindsight and realized what I was doing, I thought it was actually quite strange that I'm today as an entrepreneur doing stuff related to money. And it was almost kind of like a seed that was planted at a young age, So, just for laughs. And very much, my background was very much in communications and new media in the US. And these halls were very familiar to me. And my journey kind of went on as I went to Stanford University under the NUS Overseas College program. So I was working with a high-tech startup at that time called Quick.com. They do live video streaming from your cell phone to the web. And at that time, it was not, what they were doing essentially had the vision of FaceTime. And that was actually an innovation that was started out in 2005. So they were incubating that, for many years. And finally the company started in 2006. And what happened shortly after, as we were working with them, was, I think after a 5-year cycle, they actually got bought out by Skype for a good $150 million. And then finally to Microsoft. So I was very much, immersed in that kind of an environment where suddenly everyone was like an entrepreneur, they've got trencher stories where they've failed, they've now been, millionaires who are really humble and modest, like you wouldn't really imagine. And they had, a good product that people could use, that people could, be excited by, that people could have value from their product. So being immersed in that kind of environment really actually opened my eyes. And I believe that my practical learning to life really began. Suddenly I was thrown into an environment where I had to just, kind of go out and do what I hadn't known before. So, in a startup, people essentially just show you things and you're just meant to take it on and just kind of run with it. So at the time I was very much exposed to product marketing, to business development. So we actually negotiated deals with some of the carriers. I also had the opportunity to design some of the initial product features on the mobile phone. So it was a very good learning experience in the sense that it was very practical, it was very real world. And in a startup, you could see what you do and how it visibly impacts, the kind of production quality that they were doing or the kind of features that they were releasing in terms of their updates. And coincidentally as well, as I was in California in 2008, it was actually the wake of the financial crisis. So I was in California for about, I think, 3 months, and suddenly, there was this huge news all over, the news stations, and my co-founder and myself, who is my business partner today, experienced, the financial crisis. And as Singaporeans, going there, we didn't realize the magnitude. We only came to realize the magnitude of the impact of the lack of perhaps financial know-hows or financial management or mismanagement for that matter. And it was the first time that we were really challenged as well as individuals. And for me personally, I've always had the intention of going to the Bay Area to start my own company. after coming back. So I had dreams and aspirations of doing so. And when I saw the wake of the financial crisis and having gone into American homes, to inquire and to figure out, what was actually happening in terms of, money management, we realized that, that at a young age, perhaps, the ways and the methodologies in which money was taught was probably not accessible or not engaging. But at the root of it, what we found was that there was actually a knowing doing gap. Because all the great lessons around money could be taught to you, but how do you essentially practice that in your daily life? If I actually have a budget that I write on a piece of paper, how do I actually put that into practice? So there was a knowing doing gap in terms of financial illiteracy that we found at that time, and we said, okay, so what was it that we needed to take ownership of to kickstart? And we realized that we had the opportunity also to use Modular as a school project in Stanford. So we gathered our team, we kind of piloted it, and we actually built small prototypes and we tested it. And we actually went into American homes, and the process that we used at the time was inspired by one of our professors called Steve Blank. He calls it the customer development model, where you will never know your customer until you step out of the building. Until you get out of the building and you actually ask people, what's the challenge they're experiencing, what's the need, and sometimes they don't know themselves. Therefore, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, you discover, and you iterate, and you kind of, figure out as you go along. And with that, we gathered some stats and we realized that perhaps, 77% of parents probably don't tell the truth about money to their kids. And even in Asia, this was a survey done by Prudential, only 8% of parents think their kids keep track of their spending. And at the root of it, what we realized was you cannot give what you don't have. And as individuals, we realized that parents themselves needed to be empowered. Parents needed to know how to, translate these good values into practical ways that their children themselves could practice. So as much as we decided, okay, we'll start doing something for kids, it was about 6 months into the discovery of playing Modular that we realized that, it was a parent's challenge that we were also tackling. It was not one that was isolated to the child. And we realized that, could we actually kickstart money conversations? Because money is a very abstract thing, right? It's always here in the air, and decisions are made kind of always in the air. But how do you concretize it into something that you can actually take ownership of, and you can see visibly with a lot of clarity? And what this led us to was a lot of research. And one of the key models that we stumbled upon was what we call the KAB model, where it's knowledge, attitude, and behavior. And because money is such a complex topic, right? How do you essentially break it down, into something that you could actually take action for in a very simplified and a very understandable fashion? And at that time, we were also looking at some of the research in the space, and we realized that there was a professor that also inspired us a lot, and it was B.J. Fogg. He was a professor at Stanford, where he talked about using computers to design for behavioral change. Right? How do you use technology to design for behavioral action and behavioral change? And that was where we realized that, wow, there was actually a way to design, tools and solutions that could trigger good action. And I guess another point of contention that I had, as an individual was when I looked at the games that kids are playing. Like your club penguins, and you kind of go into the world, and then you buy clothes for your penguin, and then you kind of use virtual currencies to buy more stuff. And I kind of stopped and asked myself, is this the kind of world that we want our kids to be living in the future? Is the mass media perpetuating values of consumerism, and could we actually use games in a way that could really encourage, that could motivate positive behavior? So it was a combination and confluence of many different factors that kind of led this to what we're doing. And just wanted to let you have a sensing as well of where the company is at. When we first started, we were very much just in the space, financial education, because we're in the business of empowering people, children, young parents, and even young people. But we very quickly realized that we were traversing in this space as well, right? Because we realized that the methods in which individuals perhaps, or organizations or institutions were teaching was through textbooks, right? Text-based solutions. And they even had, in some countries they have standardized tests, and as an industry as a whole, people are figuring out if standardized tests really translates to real behavioral action, in their own lives as consumers. And we realized that if we existed as a company, how would we differentiate? And that's where we realized that we could utilize, gaming or game mechanics, or what we call play mechanics, to incentivize, good behavior, or to present money management, which is already a very boring topic, in a way that's more fun. And as we journey along, we realized that we traversed the banking space as well, which I can share, a little bit more in detail. And the banks have, today become our customers in the journey of empowering young people as well. And just to, give you a snapshot, this is the vision of the company, big vision that we have, to create a positive relationship to money with the goal of self-discovery and fulfillment. And our mission is to financially empower, triggering clarity, action among children, young people, and their parents. And these are the different verticals that we have as an organization. We'll turn 3 this year. We'll turn 3 this year. Yeah, so someone asked me, what's your proudest moment? I'm like, yes, we turned 3. So it's quite a feat for us. We create our own products as well. We also partner with banks, and we often consult them as well on some of their needs and some of their innovation kind of trajectories. At the same time, we also have an education arm where we work with schools and we work with non-profits. I'll share more with you. And what you see here
Get your water.
Suite of products. As of today, we've got 5 different products. Excuse me. This that you see here is one of our new and soon-to-be announced products. So it's top secret. One of the first to hear it. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit more public. This was one of our flagship products on the web that we designed for children ages 6 to 12. Coin Catcher is a game on needs and wants for children ages 4 to 6. Vision Rush is a budgeting app that we've created in collaboration with one of the local banks, targeted at children as well. This is actually for young adults. So that's a new. So I'll just kind of share with you the overall experience, to breeze through really quickly. This is one of the flagship products for the kids virtual world that we started back in 2010. That's right. And you own your own planet. And this is a way for children to kind of experience their own world. They can adopt little minis who are the inhabitants. The more you make good decisions, your planet grows more beautiful. And you have your own kind of mood counter. It's kind of our currency as well for children to kind of see its use and its value. And then children make decisions with money around our different verticals. You could save, earn, give, spend, invest. And in each component, there's little different modules that you could play. Kids get to set real goals as well, which I'll go through with you. And kids can give to real charities. So these are real charities that we've plugged in as well. And along with this, there is also a parents interface. So parents can actually check out what their kids are doing. They can actually see, and they can actually match your kids' savings goals, or they can encourage the kids to go along.
Question.
Do the parents know about, do the kids know that the parents actually have
They do. And we've had kids who's been pretty, I think for me as an innovator looking at it, it's like, oh, it's kind of fascinating, because we had a kid whose parent actually used Modular as a way to encourage him to help with setting the table and even playing his piano. And mom actually gave him, an allowance or like a little reward to actually set the table, right? And then it was very funny because the mom actually told me, she said, playing Modular is something that you can get your kids to do, and you can do anything you want. But I mean, just for laughs as well. I mean, what she shared later on was that as she started to create this habit, or this cultivation of habit, after I think it was like about a week or 10 days, the boy actually automatically kind of set the tables as well, without the need for money. And I think, in Singapore, we've realized that there are different schools of thought. Some of our parents are like, yeah, we're okay with giving an allowance, giving a reward to incentivize, whereas, another school of thought says, the kids have to just do it anyway. So we realized that there were many different types of styles of using this tool to empower their children. And this is one of the favorite ones that we've had. We asked kids how much does a bag of rice cost. And what has been fascinating for us is that, the kids go like, Mom, how much does a bag of rice cost? And the mom goes like, why are you asking me how much a bag of rice costs, right? And that's where we realized that parents and kids could then create the money conversations. And there was a very timely period to kickstart, conversations that went beyond rice or went beyond, understanding how your mom works for the family, for example. Just to breeze through some of these modules that we've had, this is a module in earning where kids get to take on the role as a doctor, and they manage an inventory according to the needs that their patients have. So they have to actually buy, supplies. So they learn about basic demand and supply, and they learn about how to manage their cash and how to manage, profit versus loss in a very simplified manner. And then there's this component where kids learn to save. So they go through the process of setting a savings goal. So what is your goal? So these items are actually curated from Amazon. We have an API that we pull from Amazon.com. So it's actually real prices. And this was fascinating for us because we realized that kids couldn't kind of break down the amount, and we had to, kind of use an algorithm in the back end to calculate for them. So it's simplified, where okay, $1 a day, for example, over, say for example, 84 days, right, to set this up. And I mean, this was some of the values that we saw in learning, where, it allows children to make decisions in a safe environment, and you could make wrong decisions, so to say. And that's really one of the value of games that we see, that it's safe, it's simulated. And in fact, one of the games that we had as well, before I share a story with you and one of our users, we realized that the kids were kind of managing their budget, and they kind of mismanaged their budget the first time. And then the second time, it kind of got better. And then the third time, it got better. And that sense of progress for us in using games as a way to empower was something very, I think, powerful, to understand how games could be useful, in helping the kids see their progress. So one thing that I've mentioned as well in terms of money conversations, how this has been demonstrated in our products and with our users is had a chance to speak with this little boy, Lucian, who's about 11 this year. And I had an opportunity to speak to him, and I asked him, I said, so how has your experience been, using Playing Modular? So this is actually one of our users. And he said, well, it's been good. I'm like, okay, so what's been good about it? Why do you use, for example, like the Go machine, right? And the kids go, oh, I use it because I can put it in there so I won't forget it. Right? If I put it on the paper, I would lose it. I would lose, and forget about my goal. And we found out later on that this little boy, his dad actually brought him to the sports stadium to actually sell drinks, to earn an extra allowance, so that he could work towards his goal, which was a bicycle that he was saving up. And we were quite amazed because, the dynamic relationship between parent and child actually helped encourage and support this child in terms of working towards this goal. And we realized, I was speaking to him, and he said, actually halfway I wanted to give up. I was like, why do you want to give up? I was like, it's so hard, right? It's a $500 bicycle, I'm only 11, it takes me forever to save up for it. I mean, not like us, as adults. Because the time value of money for children in the horizon is actually very far, and very far ahead. And so this little boy, he told me, he said his dad was actually the one who encouraged him, to not give up. Because dad said, if I don't give up on this goal, I can do anything in the future. And we realized that, yeah, sometimes it's not about the money, The money is just a context in which conversations can exist. Money is just a context in which, more conversation could spring about with other dimensions of life. And I mean, one thing to share as well is we, as a company, we've also realized that children get deeper relationship with their parents. I mean, this is kind of like the part about, the I would say the effectiveness, the stories of, good behavior action. On a on a company level, as an organization now having been around for 3 years, we realized that we've actually gone through many different pivots. And how the pivots actually happened, just to kind of take you back, was when we first started, we started in California. We tried to launch the product in the US, and we actually did. You know, that was about, we launched it about a year and 3 months. I think it took us about a year and 3 months to go to market. And very quickly after launching, we realized that, yeah, it's a good product, you know, there are people who are using it, but the business model was challenged. Because, I mean, it's good that we build great products, right? But innovation encompasses areas in which the business needs to be sustainable, the product needs to be, you know, useful, has had improvements from other competitors or other products, right? Or other kinds of, you know, interventions. And the two and two had to come together. So we started in the US, right? Tried to kind of break in the market and realized that the revenue that we got from the business model was actually very little. Because we realized that it was only a small subset of parents who would actually pay for a product like that. So we then pivoted and we said, okay, let's come back to Singapore and find out if maybe parents here would pay for it, right? Because this is a country known for education, right? And maybe in an Asian context, you know, they would pay you more, right? Or they would be more willing, I would say. You know, and at the time we were doing our comparisons to see which market was viable. So I mean, this is the reality. And a lot of this that I will share is probably, you know, the stories in the trenches. And we came back and we tried again to go to market with parents, but realizing as well that we did not have sufficient marketing dollars. Because as a small startup, right, to get out to market at the level of scale that some of the companies do, it's way above what we could, you know, afford or what we had in our reserves. And what we did later on was, again, found out that, yeah, you know, parents who were paying for it would actually still be a very small subset. So we then got challenged, and this was over a period of maybe, say, a year, right, a year and a half. It goes on, so you can imagine the kind of, the turmoil, right, it kind of goes in. You'd be like, okay, so what now, And we were very fortunate because as we kind of pivoted along the way, and as a startup, we had to move very quickly, we found our first paying customer to be the bank. And we had it in the business plans written very, very early on, when we were still in school, back in the university. Only to realize that, hey, the business plan is actually getting more, it's getting to fulfillment earlier than we had actually anticipated. You know, because we started questioning ourselves as a company, were we ready to, you know, to work with a big bank, right? Were we ready to work with an organization that had so much resources, right? And we realized that as a startup that if we did not prove the business model, right, our innovation would have just been something that would have been left on the shelf, that would have been a really nice product, and that would have been it. So the sustainability and the viability of the business became, you know, of question. And what we realized as well, as we go into the next phase, I mean, why I kind of put this was, the challenges that we experienced were not only on an organizational level. We realized that as we were kind of, you know, dialoguing with our children, our young people, so this was one of our user testings that we did. So we get kids to actually come in and to be part of our discussions. And we in fact also had peer prototyping. So this was a methodology that I learned in CNN, and it really came into fruition as a company. So we used this methodology where we build up mock-ups, right? We build up mock-ups to essentially try to simulate what the product would look like without having to build the product. And I mean, as we were pivoting, as I mentioned, you know, with the banks, I remember in the first year and a half of the inception of the company, going to my co-founder and actually sharing with her as well that, hey, you know, I was speaking to a group of young people, so this is not kids, young people, and I stumbled upon a question, right, when I asked young people, you know, what's your relationship to money, and how do you feel when you think about money? And this group of young people told me stuff like, I feel fearful, I feel worried, you know, I feel unsure, I feel uncertain. And at the time, you know, that was the constant kind of discovery that we had within the market, that we would continually talk to different segments. And I remember as an innovator, you know, going in and telling this idea to my team at that time, and we were all focused on, you know, kind of like the bank stuff, right? And the idea was, you know, very much said, okay, no, we can't do it now. We had to focus. right? We had to focus on the kid side of things. We had to prove it to the market. And I mean, a lesson that I learned from that time, was that when you see a need in the market, you may never know when that need would come alive. And it's almost that, despite the fact that the team kind of said, no, we can't do it, and I actually spoke to an investor as well. And the investor said, no, we can't do young adults, we have to focus on kids, right? And I was like, okay, maybe not, right? And little did we realize that as a company today, after, this was about maybe 2 years, we are pivoting to young adults as well. And what I've come to realize is that, there's a time and place for everything. But good ideas and needs analysis that have been adopted or seen in the market should find its place to germinate as well. And I mean, all of us, I believe, are innovators in our own ways. And it was a very humbling experience where, you're kind of told, no, you can't do this now, when you realize that there's actually a need in the market. And I'll share a story as well as to how I overcome this in other areas. And so today, after 2 years, close to 2.5 years, we will be launching our 5th product, which is for young adults. And this is for young adults of ages, like 21 and up to 35. So display or walk through life. What you're seeing here is just a snapshot of what the product looks like. It's actually on mobile, by the way. You get to make decisions like that.
Online.
Yeah, so it's a real life simulation. And you get to make your first decisions or your big decisions, and you get to experience external events that could be lucky or unlucky. So I mean, I'm actually really excited, as an innovator myself, to see how this product would really launch in the market. Because as an organization, we believe that financial empowerment, and what we want to do is financial empowerment for the world. And the world is a very big thing, but what I've learned, in my experience, is to break it down to small steps. And again, as my team mentioned, to be very focused on what we choose to do, but innovation having its own space as well to germinate, its own innovation labs. And we realize that as an organization, there's something very conscious that we have to do, where we say, okay, this path is the path of production, where we go to market, we launch, but on the other side, we have to have space to really delve deep into other challenges or other problems that we may see that we may want to respond to the market. And just to share as well quickly on the process, change begins with me because I realized that I am not a game designer and I don't pretend to be one, And that was a very big challenge when I first went into the business. Kind of like, what do I know about games, right? I play games, I love games, but having design it comes from a completely different world altogether, and it's in itself an art and a science. And some people devote their lives, to designing, games. And there is a genuine kind of love and passion. For me as an innovator, I'm looking for good solutions to bring to market, and I'll do whatever it takes to build a good solution so that my users can use it. And it has led me to realize that it's okay that I'm not a game designer, and that's where we work with partners, like these guys from InZen Studio. They're a game company where their core competencies is to develop, games and simulations. So we work with them from a curriculum perspective, or from a content perspective, from a vision perspective, in terms of what we want as outcomes of what we're trying to design for, and they complement us. And I've realized that this has been something very powerful, where we don't need to know everything. And in my learning so far, I realized the more I learn, the more I don't know, as I go along. And that's where working with partners like that gets exciting, because you get to complement each other's skills. And just to share the process as well, we work very closely with our users still, now that they're just a little bit more bigger and more grown up, and probably could be parents to some of the kids. So we engage them, on a very regular basis. We do testing, and we do face-to-face testing, where we let users play through the game. So these are game designers who essentially put a build up and they get feedback. And what you see is essentially the team. This was one of the collaborations that we did with another partner of ours, and this was the number of team who came together to kind of make the beta test event a possibility. And finally, I realized that it was important for me to pass it on. to continually be passionate. Because there are days when I wake up and I'm like, yeah, you know what am I doing, right? and for me, there's a very big struggle as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, which is how do you balance between urban financial education and urban financial empowerment versus rural financial empowerment? You know, and for me, I've had a heart always for the poor, and I've always known that, you know, the kind of problems that we're facing in Singapore is first world problems, and the money issues that we're facing is, you know, is completely different from, you know, our friends in Indonesia, for example. So these are a group of street children in Indonesia, and I've always asked myself this question: so when on earth can I finally go and serve, you know, like the poor? Do I have to be a millionaire like Bill Gates before I start doing? Or what resources do I need? And you know, there's kind of a mental model where you think that maybe that's the way. But the opportunity presented itself when I realized that I didn't have to be. You know, that in our little resources that we had as a company, we could still do it today. And how this has come about was I had an opportunity to go to Jakarta once, and I was working with a group of, I was actually speaking at an event, and then I met an Indonesian lady who owns a hospice in Jakarta. She does palliative care for poor people at the point of dying. And so she said, did you hear about this school called Sekolah Bisa? I'm like, no, haven't heard of it. It turns out that this is a micro school for street children where British International School actually collaborated with them to essentially create a separate school. So this is like, you know, this is like level 2 of the school, like bamboo, open air, you know, very kind of like buddy style. So this is a group of about maybe 29 students. And when I first got invited to go in, I realized that, oh my goodness, like what do I know about street children? Like what do I know about educating these kids? And I kind of asked myself, okay, if there's only one thing that I could impart or share, what would it be? And you know, going down to really just basics, right? Financial empowerment, you know, money decisions, big things. But if we simplified it, you know, it could be as simple as just knowing the difference between needs and wants. Because we're all human beings, right? Simplifying it, needs and wants. So remember the coin capture game I showed you guys? All of our products that we had? So we should put it into the hands of the kids. And you know, they learned it and they played it. And when I actually asked the kids, you know, I said, what do you do with the money that you have? I mean, take a guess what the kids said.
Buy food.
They buy food, yeah, clothes. What else would kids buy? Toys, kind of close, like really close.
Candy.
Candy! Exactly, candy! And when I heard that, they were no different from our children in Singapore. At a very human level, they were no different. And that for me, I think really inspired me to keep coming back, where I was learning so much from the kids. And a final story to share. This is Wibbit. She's a dear friend of mine, and her background was one that was really interesting as well, where she started out as a domestic helper in Indonesia, and she worked in Singapore as well. And she met, you know, a friend who essentially needed a place at that time to project manage because they were building a house. And Wibbit actually managed to kind of, you know, traverse through different types of careers, I would say. And today, you know, having evolved through her path, she's actually a teacher in the school. And when I actually first met her, I asked her, I said, so what do you want to do, right? And she said, you know, she's been at the school for about a year and a half, and she said, well, you know, I actually really want to study. I really want to study. I'm like, what do you want to study, right? She said, I want to do special needs education. And I said, okay, how much do you need, right, to do this? And she said, you know, I think it was like 2,500 Singapore dollars or something. I was like, really? That's it? You know? And this was a night class for her. And so, you know, I kind of thought to myself, what could we really do, right? And what we did was we actually went online to the equivalent of a Kickstarter. And we put a story out there, and the word just kind of spread. And through the power of, you know, kind of social media, we raised 2,500 in like what, 10 days? Yeah, 10 days. And these were all, you know, micro donations from like anonymous people or individuals. And when she actually received the money, she was just, yeah, mind blown. And I realized at that time that, you know, as individuals, all of us are actually stewards of money. We're stewards of resources that, yeah, perhaps it's just small tweaks sometimes that we do to empower and to enable and to move resources along. Because had we not seen her experience of what she was doing, I wouldn't have known. And it's so simple. We went online, did her story, put her picture, put how much we needed, and that was it. That was it. And so I've come to realize that how I've reconciled urban and rural financial education is kind of just doing what I can in my own part, and the organization as a whole doesn't have to be mobilized to do this, but it's slowly getting mobilized as well because my team, we're actually making our next trip down to Indonesia again, and so kind of step by step we're kind of passing it on, step by step we're kind of doing what we can, and as of today, having been to Indonesia for about 6 months now, we will be piloting a school banking project where we want to get these children included into the banking system and to get donors to actually match their savings goals. And these savings goals could be vocational goals to go to college, vocational goals that go to secondary school, or to vocational school. So that's another project that we're piloting. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure people have questions.
Yes, actually, how much time do we have?
I think as much as she's willing to give us.
Thanks for the talk. Actually, I've read out of things and have quite a lot of questions. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, so I was wondering for your new product, the one for those young adults, right? Is that a personalized game for each and every one of them, or is like they are kind of like interacted, linked with each other?
It's a personalized game.
Personalized.
Because it's a simulation.
So basically, you don't need to really go online and fight for resources among each other. And I was wondering if you all actually did your market research and developed the product at the same time, or is you develop the product first, after that you go there and really decide.
So we had a development process, and that's what we call kind of the lean method. So this was a method started by Eric Ries. He was the founder of IMDU. And it's quite interesting because we had a class one day and we're talking about the lean method and Eric Ries' story, and then Eric Ries suddenly popped out. He was actually present, so he was actually doing a case study. So Eric Ries has this model where it's about lean startup, where you have a hypothesis, where you put forth in the market, and then you kind of test it. So you test it by speaking to people, by validating, right? And then you could even build your own prototype after, and then you revalidate again. So it's kind of a loop that goes around. And to answer your question, what we've done is that we've done basic research where we kind of go out and we talk to people. So we have an initial hypothesis already. And what we do in the next loop is that we actually build a small prototype. And the prototype can be really, really small. It could be paper, it could be, a web page, it could be as simple as, a tool. Like for us, I think when we first started, our core feature was also the Go machine. So we actually only built the Go machine before we built out the massive wall. So that took us like about 1.5 years to build up. But the first Go machine led us about maybe a month or less.
So what's the first time when you go there and pitch for home? Like, what's the stage of development?
Okay. So we had a first paying customer who was a mom who used her product with the daughter, and we had proven that a paying customer, being a parent, had paid. So that was one, proving that there was a paying customer, there was demand. Number two, proving that you could build the product. So we actually built it up. We built up, like the mini kind of virtual world. And the third was actually critical, that we could find our team. And Min comes from a finance background. I come from, like a psychology, media background. And we needed a programmer who would double up as our CTO. So the last candidate or the last person was critical in the funding process.
What is like your role in this company? I think besides the co-founders, like CEO.
It's me. Yeah, I'm the dreams architect. We've got crazy titles. Yeah, I mean, my primary responsibilities are really to ensure that there's company sustainability and viability, right? To ensure that the business model is being constantly iterated and being met and being validated. The second, I think, primary duty that I have is really to ensure that the products that we create deliver value for our customers and for our users. And for me, it's really all about the customers, all about the users. And then finally, it's about the team. For me, it's kind of all about the people, to ensure that my team is operating in its most optimized fashion, to ensure that my team is really, fulfilled in actually what they're doing as well.
And then, at first you have a programmer in your team, right? And then I'm sure there will be like other designers, storyline designers, etc. So how many people are there?
For the current project that we are developing, we have 13 people on the project. And it's a combination of programmers, animators, artists, people in marketing, people in communications, business people, product designers, product developers.
So for each of the product, you basically use the same, you're working as the same, like it's the same group of people keep working with each other.
That's right. The core is always the same. For example, it's like with this new young adults product that we're working on, we've kind of decided to collaborate with InZen Studio because they have the core competency to deliver a much bigger project. With Vision Rush, for example, we worked with a small studio to collaborate on designing it. So the core always remains the same. The playing one team always remains the same.
Do you consider the part where framework can actually deal with teachers and parents that misconceptions previously as a very crucial part in the start of business model?
Elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
As in interactions between the kids and the parents, do you consider that as a very crucial part of
business model? I would say in the larger scheme of things, yes. We were hoping to, as a business, also go direct to consumers as well. As much as we have this, B2B model, business to business model right now, the eventual goal is still a B2C model. Any other questions?
Is there any investment elements in your model? Like teach the kids how to invest other than like buy the house or things? But I think it's buy the house is only for the young adults, right?
Yes, young adults, that's right.
Whereas for the kids, it's like they can start do investment or kind of like growing the capital.
Yes, we have a small module around that in investing that we haven't released. So it's kind of like showing the kids the concept of the role of a bank, and if they actually put their money into like a savings deposit, like how much would it yield over time, and there's even kind of like investing for the rainy day, right? So we have a small module for kids.
But the young adults ones, do you have a more sophisticated system of like do investment, like buying the bonds or things like that?
Yes, we actually have plans to do that. The simulation that you will see, it has a good overview of the key concepts of money, but we realize that even with investing, which I'll be keen to hear more of your thoughts on that, we want to spring it off to another product.
Is there any legal problems you face when you first start? When you first start out?
Legal problem.
Not really legal, but like those maybe those kind of contracts or something. So where do you get those assistance from?
We had advisors and investors who were legally trained, and we were constantly networked into people. So if we needed, like lawyers, we would seek them out. We would search for them through introductions. So not a big hurdle, but for me, we were very choosy on finding the best and the most well fit. So we had to go through many different things to find the best.
Well, I'm working with schools because your product center is school itself. So do you work with schools?
We do. Like you saw in our last vertical, education, we work with local schools, local primary schools. It's not a main core of the business in terms of its business model, but we go into schools to give workshops, to give,
It's like outreach.
Yeah, it's like a carnival day, money carnival day.
I was watching it, I can't remember if it was MSNBC or who it was this morning. And they had someone on there who was talking about financial literacy. So I think, oh, this is perfect for this morning, I'll watch this story. And she was, I can't remember if she's with World Bank, but I think she was. And she was saying, actually, most people pay no attention to the finances unless it comes down to specific instances like buying a house, buying a car, these sort of critical points in which they then, everything comes together for them and they have to focus on this because they're not focusing necessarily. And maybe we can, she said, we can get people when they're younger so that we can give, and I thought, wow, this is a great pitch for your program. But are you thinking about it, or does it make sense that maybe the adults that you're talking about would be interested in what you have to offer at certain critical points? And how would that play into what you're talking about?
It's a good point, because if you realize that for young adults what we're doing is that we're traversing and we're bringing forth the big moments. So we're actually making thinking visible, because a lot of all these concepts of like buying your first house, buying your first car, getting married, they're very big and very nebulous goals, right? When we think about it, sometimes we get fearful and we get afraid and we get crippled, for example. So the aim of this simulation is very much to bring forth the steps it would require to actually make the decisions and what you need to actually make those decisions. And the critical part is to actually see the consequences. So you get to actually see the consequences. And there was also a research study that was done by Professor Lewis Mandel in the US, and he said a lot of times with young people, if you do anything in what he calls the pre-need, which is decision making of specific purchases or goals, it goes this way. It goes above the head. So the intervention and the relevance needs to be very timely and very unique and useful to the individual at that same time.
How do you first determine the market price
Oh,
of one product?
Good question. As a lot of entrepreneurs who've done pricing before, you just never know.
So
You just really have to, put a value down, right, and then you test it. But obviously, it needs to cover your cost. So you can do a grounds-up pricing where you put in all your cost and you can attach a margin to it, right? That can be one method of doing, your pricing model.
So basically, it's possible for you to go and talk to all those potential customers, ask them about their opinions on this price, and after that, we keep adjusting the price.
That's right. Yes.
And do you consider the OC experience as very, very useful along the way?
OCBC?
An OC
NOC. Oh yeah.
is very useful.
It was life changing. I think for me to be in California, I love California. I love and would love to still go back to California. So I make trips every year back there, and we have our curriculum developer who's in Washington DC, and we've got a business development gentleman who's in New York. So our roots are still connected to the Bay Area, and we have a pilot that's running now with Zions Bank, one of the credit unions in the US.
We were talking yesterday a little bit about clusters of innovation, in these basically locations like Palo Alto and Silicon Valley and even Beijing and other places that are going on. What is Singapore like at the moment for you and generally for people like you?
I would say that the entrepreneurship space is still growing, and we as a nation are fairly nascent. Having said that, there has been companies that have exited. For example, one of our investors, Darius, he runs 10Cube. They're a mobile security company, and they recently, in the last, 2 years, exited to McAfee. So that's just one example of some of the innovators and inventors here in Singapore who've seen that kind of maturity. So I would say that, very small number of, entrepreneurs who have seen maturity, but there's a big chunk of us who are kind of in, like Series A and pre-Series A stage, where what that means is that, you're in your kind of early stages of having proven market validation, proven, that there's a product, there's a demand, there's a need, and you see that there is also a burgeoning increase of support in startups from the governments, for example. And at the same time, there's spaces like, Hub Singapore, Block 21, that are bubbling up recently. So you see a kind of a groundswell of entrepreneurs like, put into these places. So it definitely is growing, and suddenly there is also maturity in the sense that these mature entrepreneurs act as investors, or they act as angels and supporters back into the ecosystem. So there's a constant loop that kind of passes it on. They keep going and they keep supporting.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking from more back out from this thing. So Singapore has a lot of shopping malls, which kind of encourages consumerism. So I was wondering how much has your game affected, say, the kids and their parents' perceptions about, consumerism? Has kids who played these games, has that affected their behavior in shopping malls? Because when I go on Sundays, I see the kids at the shopping mall, I think the whole day, they have a lot of games within the shopping mall. And I'm sure that's a very nice marketing strategy by the shopping malls to keep the kids glued there, and they have all kinds of this nice looking things that they can play. So my question was that, how much do you think your game has influenced that real shopping trends of kids and their parents?
I have a case study of this in a different perspective, where we had one of our users who was, I think, 10. He wanted to save up for a PSP, right? And I think for us, we always, traverse the goal part with a lot of care, right? Because you don't only save towards something that you want, but you save also because of the rainy day, right? So when we actually first spoke to this boy, it turns out that he was saving for his PSP in a transparent jar. So he could actually see his money grow, right? And I think that actually encouraged him to save up for his PSP. But what happened afterwards was he actually told his mother that he did not want the PSP anymore.
Wow.
And we were like, wow, why, right? Why? And it turns out that this little boy, he said, because I could then save it up, right? And maybe I could get something bigger at the end of the day. So his mom actually brought him to the bank to save the money up. So we were like, yeah, and I think this boy demonstrated something that is very intrinsic, which is delaying gratification. And that was something very powerful for me, that we realized that, that there is an inherent possibility for the child to delay, his or her gratification. In the larger scheme of things, if you're talking about X number of people who have, influenced their decisions in terms of choices in the malls, I think that we still have a long way, but I believe we're on the right path. And actually, that's a similar sentiment that I share as well. When I first got back to Singapore after being in California, I was just like shocked. Just malls and malls and malls everywhere.
Yeah.
And there is no sense of, it just never seems to be enough.
Especially if you go to MRT, you have to get out in a mall, which is like how scary, right? Oh,
I've
wow.
been here for 4 days, I haven't gone to a mall yet. No, you have.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because since you consider yourself an innovator, I'm sure you have a lot of ideas. So what's the next? After playing Modular, what do you see yourself doing?
After playing with it.
That's a secret, right?
I mean, it's a good question because I do want, I mean, the vision for myself is, okay, maybe serial entrepreneur, right? What the next idea is for the next company, I'm not sure yet, but I have a lot of ideas for the current product that we want to build. So we're thinking about, even investing. That's one big part that we are, kind of interested in doing. The second thing is I'm thinking of a combination between a life coach versus a financial coach. So I want to see how that, mix could really empower people. But on a personal level, my dream is to be a theologian one day.
Really?
Yeah. Or a missionary. Yeah. And I think I have an opportunity to be a different kind of missionary, It's not a missionary in a traditional sense. But yeah, I'm still kind of, evolving and redefining what that means for myself.
Just a comment, I don't know what your time is like. I think you're on the right path with this credit union thing. Because I do think that credit unions, at least in the United States, feel that they have a very different relationship with the people because they're member associations. And this whole idea of financial education and financial literacy and assisting people, and I think especially the idea of focusing on our kids. And they're a huge network. And I think their views of the world are somewhat different than banks.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's very true.
So I think that might be a group that would really resonate with your notions. Other questions?
We'll first start with Modular. Do you have other ideas, like other business ideas you have that you want to do?
beyond playing Modular, beyond that, you mean suddenly move out of that entire domain, or within that idea of financial
As in
education?
an entirely different idea. Like, for example, environment or whatever. As in other industries. Then, as in I want all ideas to pick one only, or just have the idea and idea.
Right. I would say, okay, I was also discerning between setting up a quick office in Singapore. So we were actually in talks with the founders, and we were really discussing, office space and stuff like that, whether it would be viable to set up an operational unit in Singapore. So I mean, one of the key trade-offs was that for me. But nothing really kind of concrete in other areas. But what I was very, very certain about was that if I could have the opportunity to work with children, it's like, yeah, I'll jump on it. And children plus technology. Because I saw technology as an opportunity to scale, as an opportunity to, present solutions in a very different way.
Did you try doing this in other Asian countries? Like, I'm thinking there could be a big market in India and in China, because it's the same problems that they are facing. The savings is going down. The people are saving less and less compared to earlier generations. Have you taken that jump yet?
We have spoken to ICICI Bank.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have China not yet, because we know that's another world. We are also kind of discerning markets that are very similar to Singapore. Like Dubai, for example, Australia, Hong Kong. Yeah. So those are some of the initial markets that we're thinking of, kind of expansion.
Anything else?
I have one more question. I was wondering about how did you get the banks on board? Was it difficult to convince
You
them?
wanted to describe the first meeting?
Yeah.
The first meeting. Okay, so we have two bank customers today. The first being OCBC with that. So it was actually interesting because, and this is the part that you'll never know, right? We met OCBC a year before the deal actually happened. And it was just really touch base, So the first meeting was really, what's you doing? What's your product about? This is what we're doing. So it's a little bit still, kind of like you have your own space, send off, and kind of like, okay, just be a bit more cautious. But it was not only after a year that we reconnected again to really decipher what opportunities was there to actually innovate. And that was when we realized that there was an internal impetus from the organization as well, being the bank to innovate. And that was when the product market fit, it kind of came together.
Took a year.
Well, we were talking yesterday and the day before about ideas germinating and sometimes taking a while, sometimes years or even decades before the time is right. And basically, you're talking about fertile ground. Cheers.
Truly.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. And the interesting thing is that we were not actively seeking the bank's partnership a year before. So, I mean, do you know what I mean? And
Yes.
sometimes you just never know. You're just meeting just really collaboration, understanding what each other is doing, and then finally, when the time is right and fertile, things happen.
So in Singapore at the moment, when you go to a place and mingle, where would be the right place for you to, or for the students, or for people to think about, what do I need to go to? Are there groups that meet? Is there some Friday afternoon informal group that has coffee and tea and just meets and talks ideas? Or is there a place that you go and that you come out inspired and happy every week or every month?
Okay. Locally, the Hub Singapore actually has great events. And that's really where the confluence of, even filmmakers and Ashoka Fellows, they actually come by. In fact, even actually NUS Business School, they've got a ton of great, programs. I actually met Muhammad Yunus in NUS.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, Muhammad, I was kind of like a fangirl. I mean, he was a little bit of like a great inspiration for me when I first started the business. So I actually met him in the NUS Business School, so that's actually a good place to go to as well. But for me, a lot of the times, my inspiration also comes from different parts of the world. So I actually travel quite a fair bit. I'm very, very fortunate to do that, to travel to conferences, to camps, to retreats. So I think it's also being open to seek out some of these overseas experiences because they're so different, And they're such inspirational events. Like the one that I went for recently was in Taiwan. in Taipei with the 慈济 Buddhist Foundation Global Entrepreneurship Camp. And I mean, I'm a Catholic, and going into this organization with all my peers, you know, all Buddhists, and you see the humanitarian relief that they do, and the kind of devotion that they have in the community is mind-blowing. So for me, it's like, you know, I'm going in as a very curious bystander to understand. And for me, it was really a really powerful experience. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being here. I brought you a small gift from Italy.
Wow, thank you.
And so, I mean, it's Northern Italy at the moment.
Thank
So,
you.
greatly appreciate it. I wondered if I picked this up on a plane. This is the Wall Street Journal. I said, this doesn't look like the Wall Street Journal, the innovation issue. Just this weekend, did you see?
Wow,
You
thank
have that
you.
too.
Thank you.
Take it away. Well, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it.